Before we begin with our keynote speaker, just want to kind of run through a few things. So today's presentation, we'll start off with a conversation with Arkansas State Representative Ashley Hudson, which will be moderated by Sarah Gorman. After that, I will provide a advocacy one-on-one presentation, leveraging some of my previous experience working on Capitol Hill, and my passion for politics and advocacy. And then after that, one of my colleagues, Sandra Cormona Job, she'll present on community programs that support underserved students. She works both at TRIO and she's also the vice president of Mamás Unidas. So before we begin with the keynote speaker, for those of you who are either watching this on YouTube or joining us as an attendee that are not part of SACAC, just know that SACAC is a wonderful organization, a nonprofit that supports over 2,000 members across the Southeast, mainly high school counselors, college admissions officers, independent educational consultants, and community-based organizations. The main mission basically is to provide support for college access for all students. And they provide wonderful professional development workshops, college tours, annual conference, etc. It's a $45 a year membership. So if you're not a member, I highly encourage you to become one. This year, every year we have an annual conference. This year will be in New Orleans. Unfortunately, the registration is already closed, but I just want to make you aware that we have an annual conference around our region, this year being in New Orleans. And hopefully one year it'll come to Little Rock. Um, Another thing to kind of put on your radar is we have an annual, what we call Sweet Tea Tour. This is a college tour in certain parts of our region. The cool thing is that this year is going to be coming through Arkansas. As you can see, the college list here. Registration opens in early March. If you're interested in going on this tour, I've heard nothing but good things. I highly encourage you to register and go meet the admissions officers in these schools. Um, all right. So at this point, I'll pass it off to Sarah, who will be the moderator for this event. And Ms. Hudson, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us and to giving us your insight. I really look forward to the conversation. Sarah?
Yeah, no, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
As Steve said, I'm Sarah Gorman. I serve as the Director of College Counseling at Pulaski Academy, and I'm grateful to be with you today as we gather to explore the important role that advocacy plays in education and to have meaningful conversation about how educators and community members can engage thoughtfully in the policy process. So thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We're pleased to welcome Arkansas State Representative Ashley Hudson, who serves District 75 in Pulaski County, including West Little Rock, which is where I am. First elected to the Arkansas House of Representatives in 2020, she is currently serving her third term and works on several key committees, including Judiciary, City, County, and Local Affairs, and the Joint Budget Committee. In addition to her legislative work, Representative Hudson is an attorney and community advocate who has built her career around public service and civic engagement. A Little Rock native, she holds degrees from Vanderbilt University, the University of Arkansas, and the University of Arkansas School of Law. Her work in the legislature reflects a strong commitment to listening to constituents, strengthening communities, and engaging thoughtfully with the issues facing Arkansas today. So we're so excited to have her join us to share her experiences with advocacy, policymaking, and the importance of authentic connections between educators, communities, and elected leaders. So Representative Hudson, thank you again for being here with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. That was a very kind introduction. Thank you.
Before we jump into some of the broader questions about advocacy and education policy, I'd just love to start by giving everyone a chance to get to know you a little better. So not just as a legislator, but as a person and a community member. So could you tell us a little about your background and what shaped your interest in public service?
Yeah, sure. So I was actually born in Little Rock, but I didn't grow up here. I grew up on a farm in Illinois. My parents got divorced when I was pretty young, and so I had the experience of growing up in a more rural community. very similar to the ones that we have here throughout the state. And then came back, started moving back south when I went to college at Vanderbilt, and then the University of Arkansas for law school. And then we decided to come here to raise our family after Cliff and I got married. I met my husband in London. He was a Marine stationed at Central Naval Command in London. I was doing an internship the summer before I started law school. So I was hoping that summer that I would meet some guy with an accent. I should have been more specific that I was looking for an English accent because I found a Southern accent. So we started dating that summer. We did long distance because he was stationed in Spain. He went to Iraq. I went to law school, and we got married and settled here and had 4 kids. So I work at QTAC Rock, which is a national law firm with offices here, Fayetteville and Rogers. And we've got offices all over the country in their healthcare regulatory group. So people are always like, oh, you do med mal, and I don't. I work with providers on reimbursement appeals, regulatory issues, licensing, issues with the inspector general, investigations and so on. And then I have a pretty large employment practice as well. And I've been with the firm now for about 12 or 13 years. And I've been a licensed attorney now for 19 years.
Tell us a little bit then about your first election cycle. What led you to that? And then once you were elected, what surprised you most when you transitioned from the campaign trail to actually serving?
So what I learned very quickly is that there is a big difference between campaigning for a friend or another candidate and campaigning for yourself. It really changed my perspective on the entire process, and I really considered myself, especially in that first election cycle, as sort of a political tourist, if you will, just to because I didn't really have a lot of experience in running for office, and really my experience in volunteering was pretty casual. I ended up running for office in the first place, quite frankly, because of a comment that Lucy, my oldest daughter, made. She would have been about 10 at the time, 9 or 10. And I had come home and was talking to Cliff in the kitchen about something local in politics and something I was frustrated about. And she overheard us and came in and said, well, why don't you do it? And, I kind of brushed her off and said, well, that's silly. But then I kept thinking about it because we had always told the kids, and we have 4 kids, I probably should have mentioned them, that they can do hard things, and that they can be brave, and they can try things that scare them. And I realized that I wasn't practicing what I was preaching. And so at that point, the first thing I did was really started to look at who my elected officials were, what races were upcoming, and where I thought my skill set might match up with the role that I was running for. And so I landed on the state representative seat, which was District 32 at the time before redistricting. It did have an incumbent in it, but I noticed that over the past few election cycles that the challengers were doing increasingly better against that incumbent. So I felt as though, if I came in, was able to run a good campaign and to work on getting my name out there, that I might be able to tip that over to where I could win the race. I announced in August of 2019. So very quickly, we did what everyone did in 2020, and we pivoted. So that was like the word of 2020, right? Just pivot.
Right.
So I ran my first campaign during COVID, and it was primarily a Zoom-based campaign after a certain point. And, we were doing Zoom events, Zoom fundraisers, Zoom meet and greets. By the end of it, we were literally just doing Zoom trivia with Trivial Pursuit cards, trying to come up with, interesting things to do via Zoom. And when we finally got to election day in November of 2020, I lost on election night by 107 votes and was devastated. And so I went to sleep that night, and I couldn't sleep. And I woke up at 3 or 4 in the morning, and I'd gotten a bunch of texts from people saying, don't concede yet. We've still got all these mail-in ballots that we have to count, because in COVID, of course, thousands of people voted via mail-in, and those ballots had not been counted yet. They were just sitting at the election commission, and they had not even started those yet. So that process took an additional 2 weeks, given the volume of votes that came in. And little by little, the numbers would change every day. They'd give an updated count, and it was, I'd be up, I'd be down. And when it was all said and done, I was up by 24 votes. It took about 10 days later. So my first election, I won by 24 votes. So if anyone ever tries to tell you your vote doesn't matter, just remember it 100% does, especially in these local races.
Wow. That just the fact that the point that those votes do matter to the point that you remember the 107 and the 24. It
It
makes
was a
such a
traumatic
difference.
week.
I can only imagine in a traumatic year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. How has your perspective on policy changed from making that shift from a citizen advocate to a legislator?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I think has changed is that my job as a legislator, in many respects, is very different from my job as an attorney, but in some respects it's similar. And in the respect that it's similar is that my job is to try to get things done, to get results for my client, if you will, and my client being my constituents, which means that I realized very early on that my task was going to be to work on building relationships across the aisle. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest differences, because people will often ask me, how can you stand to be around X, or, what's it like when you're all in the chambers, or the Republicans on this side and the Democrats on this side. And, from the outside looking in, that's kind of how we all, as constituents, perceive the political arena. But the reality is that in order to be effective, especially in a legislature where we being the Democrats have a super minority, because there are only 19 of us out of 100 legislators in the House, and I think 7 out of 35 in the Senate. You have to build relationships across the aisle. You have to build trust. You have to be able to work together. And, sometimes on the advocacy side, especially people who are doing partisan advocacy, get very frustrated by the idea of having to be more, willing to work with people across the aisle, because the advocacy is different, especially depending on the topic. But one thing I learned from being an attorney is that my co-counsel in one case may be my opposing counsel in the next case, maybe the mediator in the next case. And so the skill that has been so valuable to me has been able to pull out personal relationships from issues, so that I can try to preserve those relationships and then argue about the issues on the table. And that's been it was a big challenge, especially in my first session, but that's been probably the most valuable skill that I've had over the past 3 sessions.
Yeah, everything is so relational. But then again, you can't take it personal, right?
Right.
When it comes
Right.
to the disagreement and the working together. Yeah. What do you wish more educators and community members understood about the day-to-day responsibilities that you have as a representative?
Yeah, I think that, and this is lost, and I do the same thing with my elected representatives, that we're all people.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that most people don't realize is that legislators in Arkansas don't have their own staff. So the phone number that you see on the Arkansas legislature website is my cell phone. So it's me, and the emails are checked by me and responded to by me. We have some shared staff that can help us with a few things, but you are likely to get through to the person who you're trying to reach, the elected person you're trying to reach. But that also means that it may take a few days sometimes for someone to get back to you, because all of us, this is a part-time legislature, and all of us have families and jobs and whatever. And so that can be kind of hard. Although it is always, I always love when somebody calls me and they're like, "Oh, I thought I was going to talk to your assistant." I'm like, "Well, it's me." But yeah, I mean, and also that kind of going back to this idea of relationships, especially with educators, how important it is to look up who your elected officials are and start reaching out to them outside of session, to try to build those relationships, so that when you have an ask during session, that person knows who you are, and has some idea of what it is you're asking. And I think that can be really valuable. And I know it takes some additional time, and educators are spread thin anyway, but building those relationships early can really pay off.
Tell us a little bit about how your work time is made up. Is it mostly working on legislation and then giving the time to the constituents? Are you working in committees? How is that breakdown?
So my lawyer answer would be, it depends. So we're because we're a part-time legislature, we meet every other year for a general session, which is the big session where we're there for several months and we run bills of all types. And those sessions happen in odd numbered years. So next year, January 2027, we'll start the next general session. Then in off numbered years, we do the fiscal session, just to approve the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And we'll do that this year in April. So that means that there are large periods of time when we're not in session. And that's when more of my time is devoted to meeting with constituents, meeting with, community groups, and doing meet and greets and getting out there and talking to people and finding out, what concerns they have. I also have constituents who call me all the time, with issues that they're having. And sometimes they're not issues that I can help on the state level, but I might be able to connect them with somebody who can. And so I deal with those all the time. And then the bill writing really happens throughout the year. And a lot of my best bill ideas have really come from those conversations with constituents, which is why I think that those interactions are so important. So, we've got it's called BLR, the Bureau of Legislative Research, who helps us with drafting bills. So I can go to them and say, I have this idea for, I want to amend this bill to say this, or I want to develop a bill that says why. And they can help us craft that. Or we can look to, what other states have done on an issue and say, hey, I like what they did here, but I don't like what they did there. Can you help me? And that process generally takes a long time, especially on bills that require some community feedback. So you might get a draft, take it out and say, what do you think of this? And they'll give feedback. A good example of that was a bill I passed last session, involving incarcerated veterans, where it requires the sheriff's office to look up whether or not that veteran is a veteran when they're taken into the jail, to try to connect them with services that might be beneficial to them and might be an option to pull them out of the jail system and get them on an intervention program that might be more appropriate for whatever the problem is. That process started in May of 2023. And I needed to get feedback from several veterans organizations, from the Sheriff's Association, from the Administrative Office of the courts. And each one of them had different pieces that they were interested in. And then, of course, when you change something, you need to go back to the other groups that might be interested and see if those changes affect their support of the bill, and trying to make it right. And we literally were working on that bill, even though we started over a year before session, until minutes before the vote in committee. So yeah, so
an
that
incredible
bill
amount of
writing process.
legwork, right?
Do what?
Yeah, an incredible amount of legwork, but
Yes.
important to make sure that all the stakeholders are, have a voice and are aware of changes that might impact them.
Oh, no, that's right. And I always, especially in a situation like that, where I'm asking the sheriff's departments in the state to add something to the things that they already have to do, I wanted to make sure that I didn't blindside them and throw a bunch of obligations on that they weren't going to be able to handle. And so, working with those interested groups and getting feedback is not only valuable, but in many cases critical. Because otherwise you've put together a bill that's just completely unworkable.
Well, let's dig into some of those state level issues, specifically to education, because we all know that we've seen a lot of changes So from your perspective, what are the biggest shifts educators should be paying attention to right now?
Everything comes from the Learns Act at this point, and then the Access Act that was passed this last session for higher ed. We've seen changes in teacher pay at the public school level. We've seen changes in teacher fair dismissal. We've of course seen the changes the vouchers brought in to the that tension between public and private schools, and we're starting to get feedback from parents, from teachers, from administrators about things that are working and things that aren't. And the concern that I had when we passed Learns Act in 2022, I guess 2022 was was the cost and the lack of interest by the sponsors and the governor's office in doing any sort of amendments or changes to it during the time that we passed it. That bill was 100 and almost 200 pages. And we passed it in less than 2 weeks. And I was concerned that going forward, that would be the same stance they would take, and we would not be able to make any sort of amendments. We've been able to make some amendments. There were some amendments, and there's some rule changes with regard to allocations for the voucher spending on extracurricular activities. And there's a rule out for comment on that. There have been some changes and some modifications on the reading interventionists that are available, and so there's been some modifications around the edges. But then there's also been a significant increase in the money being put into the Learns Act. And I'm very worried still about whether or not the state is going to be able long term to carry that burden, and what effect it may have on other programs. But I've been more concerned, or maybe concerned in a different way more recently, about the effect that the Learns Act and then the accompanying higher ed bill have had on teachers and administrators' speech, and what we're seeing on our college campuses. Of course, we had the big thing with the new dean of the law school, whose offer was rescinded based on work that she'd done, and the effect that that's going to have on the ability of our educators to teach our children and our young adults without fear of retribution because of the subject matters that they're teaching. So if I were putting the status update for education in Arkansas on Facebook, it would be it's complicated.
Right. So how do lawmakers balance those statewide policy goals with the very different realities sometimes of what's happening on the local level in the districts and schools?
So ideally that balance should be struck by getting feedback, just like we talked about with the bills, by getting feedback from local stakeholders, getting, especially with something as large as Learns Act, perhaps getting studies or having a panel go in and get some larger responses from all the school districts around the state, all of the private schools around the state, to try to get some additional information. Unfortunately, at least at this stage, that's not exactly what we're seeing. I don't sit on the education committee, but my friend Denise Garner has been working on this for years, and has been working to try to get some additional information and transparency about some of these issues of concern, because the Learns Act isn't going anywhere. But I think that there are a lot of things we could do to make it work better, that would be beneficial for the students and for the educators, who are all affected on a daily basis by the provisions of it. And I think there are things that we can do to make it work, but it's going to take work to get
there. In this process, what, if any, voices do you feel like are missing from the education side of things?
Educators. I think that educators and parents have been really, with the exception of very small groups of parents who have been able to break through. I've not seen the voices of educators really being taken into account, and I haven't. But on the flip side, I haven't seen as much participation by educators. And I get that some of that is fear of retribution and concern about how it affects jobs. But educators' voices are really important, especially when we're talking about the reading metrics and some of the educational aspects and requirements that the LEARNS Act put in. We could really benefit from having more educators involved in that conversation. I think that we need more input from administrators, especially from the budget standpoint, because administrators are really getting the fingers pointed at them when we're in budget committee hearings about mismanagement, alleged mismanagement of funds, not allocating money appropriately, and the allegation that public schools have plenty of money, they're just not using it wisely. And so I think that we would benefit from having administrators who are willing to come in and show exactly how they're using their funds and how that's been effective or what they need. But educators in particular, I think, would be very useful in this. Parents would be extremely valuable, but the issue that we run into, especially when we get into budget hearings and then when we get into the general session, is that everybody works. So our hearings happen during the workday, and that means that it happens during the times when people are not able to participate in the way that would be very, very effective, sitting in front of the committee and making statements or going down and personally lobbying your elected officials. Which is why, I encourage people always to try to build those relationships separately. So that you can ask your state legislator to go have a cup of coffee with you after work, or you can, schedule a phone call at your convenience and start having those conversations and explaining your perspective on issues like, education and, like being a parent in the Arkansas education system, or, whatever that topic is.
So then from your perspective, since that voice is needed, what could we be doing as, as representatives of our schools, as members of organizations like SACAC? What would be most effective for us to do to have our voices be heard?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two broad areas that you could look to. One, of course, is that individual advocacy, where you, Sarah Gorman, reach out. I think you said I'm your representative, so I mean, you do that anyway. But say, I have a concern about, education in Arkansas, and I wondered if I could talk to you about that. Or I wanted to introduce myself as I'm an educator here in Arkansas, and I'd just like to talk to you and get to know you. So that's one area of advocacy. And remember, too, when you go into these conversations, that you're a subject matter expert in what it is that you're wanting to talk about. If you're talking about education, the legislators, there are very few teachers. There are a couple of school administrators, but for the most part, there are not a lot of educators in the legislature. So when you speak to legislators, you are the subject matter expert. So you can go in with that authority because you're the one that's been educated. You're the one that does continuing ed. You're the one that has the training. So you can talk, and you're the one on the ground seeing things every day in school. So you can go in and use it as an opportunity to show your expertise. As an organization, what I've been recommending to organizations when I come and speak to them is that you need to be thinking now about what, if any, legislative priorities you as an organization have in 2027. And at least organizing so that you can start thinking long term, and then maybe narrowing that list as we get closer to January of next year. Because when we, pre-bill filing will start in November of this year for the session in January of 2027, which means that legislators are right now working on legislation. So if you want to be part of those conversations, you need to be thinking about next year now. Looking in particular for your organization at the members of the education committees, the Senate and House education committees, and seeing if any of your members are in those members' districts. And if not, just reaching out as an organization and starting to make those introductions to the individual members of those committees now. And working on, making sure they know who you are, what SACAC does. offering to, sit down or have a meeting or do a Zoom with them so that they can hear a little bit more about the organization and what your priorities are. But because all of these pieces of legislation start so very far in advance, now is the time to start working on that advocacy, especially if you have legislation you want to advance or legislation that you would like to see not advance. The other thing that I tell organizations that they can do, and this is something that is more kind of short to middle term goals, is that many organizations will come up during what we call ALC week, which is legislative council, and host a breakfast or a coffee or a lunch, and then have all of the legislators sort of come in and out. So you can have a few members there to introduce themselves very casually while you're doing this event. And in that case, we meet for a week. All the legislators come into town, and we do it every month. And it just offers an opportunity without any sort of agenda or programming to say, hey, we've done coffee and donuts this morning. Come by and grab that. And we'll, we just want to introduce ourselves, maybe give you a flyer for things that we do. And that offers another opportunity for the organization to kind of get in front of legislators, so that familiarizing the organization to the legislators in advance of 2027. So before there are any big asks, right now you're just trying to relationship build. So, those are a couple of things that I've been advising organizations to work on in the interim. And really it's not an or, it's and for all of those things. Because familiarity makes a big difference, especially at the local level, on the getting communication with your local elected official, or at least getting their attention when you have a concern about a bill. But it also will help you if there are legislative agenda items that the organization has and wants to start presenting or proposing in the months leading up to the next session.
So let's talk a little, kind of pull it back a little more general about just constituent feedback that's meaningful. Could you tell us a time when you worked with a constituent on anything, not specifically maybe education, where it genuinely influenced your thinking on a matter, and maybe what were some qualities of that interaction that helped your mindset change, helped it be effective or meaningful?
So the most meaningful interaction I've had with a constituent is something that did not lead to my presenting any legislation, but led to me being really motivated to speak against bad legislation. So in my first session in 2021, that was the year that the legislature started passing a lot of anti-trans legislation, the Girls Act, the SAVE Act. I mean, there were a bunch of things, and a lot of it was geared towards kids, and not necessarily geared towards adults, but geared towards kids who, by all accounts, even by the sponsors of these bills, might be confused, might be going through something. But in any case, we're somebody's kids, and which as a mom affected me, because we've all seen our kids struggle. And so I started looking into how many trans kids there are in the state, and there are not many. I think at the time there were 40 or 50. How many of them were participating in sports? Maybe one or two. And then also trying to reach out to families to try to get to know some of these families and how this type of legislation was affecting them. I discovered that there is a spike in suicide attempts among trans teenagers every time a legislature even presents these bills, which killed me. It really did. And so during that session, we get these notes sent to our desk during session. And it'll be usually says, vote for this bill or don't vote for this bill, or give me a call. And they're little pink slips, just like the old out of office pink slips. And we were about to vote on one of these bills, and I got a note, and it was from a teenaged constituent, and it said, "Please stop trying to hurt my friends." So I kept that one.
Right. Oh my goodness. I just got
So
chills.
yeah, and yeah. But I kept that note, and I have spoken against the anti-trans bills every session, even though I've been told over and over again it's not a very popular issue for me to be standing up on, because I keep thinking about that note where the kid asked me to quit hurting their friends.
Oh gosh. So the meaning behind the stories of the people you talk to are really the things that makes the difference, right? When you hear from the
Oh, yeah.
constituents.
Yeah. I mean, and I talk to, people call me sometimes. I have a guy who's very passionate about daylight savings, and he texts me and lets me know it's dark outside. I have a guy who's very passionate about the lights that we use in street lights. I had, I get people that do stuff like that, but then I also, like during COVID, I had people who needed help with their unemployment benefits, those COVID unemployment benefits they couldn't get, and they were, really desperate because their power was about to get turned off or they were about to get evicted. And I remember, all of those. And people call me or text me because I'm like, this is my cell phone number, so you might as well just go ahead and use it for stuff. But I get calls from people outside of the district too. The Franklin County advocates against the prison started texting and calling all of the legislators, and I've grown very close to some of them because they just started sort of a guerrilla strategy of trying to reach out to all of us to speak out against having this prison built in their county that they didn't want. And so, I talk to them, and those conversations often lead to discussions about other things that they're concerned about. So the part of the job that I like the most is working with constituents and is in talking to constituents about things that are important to them. The campaigning can be ugly. The legislative session can be really hard, but talking to constituents and kind of realizing what it's all for, why you're up there,
Mhm.
it's very grounding, and it's the part that keeps me thinking that the work is useful.
So when professionals, educational professionals like we are advocating for systems change, and we're doing so with maybe some legislators who are not on board with that, how do we work on maintaining those positive working relationships while still fighting for something that's an opinion and that's different than what they currently hold or are advocating for politically?
So it's hard, and I'm not going to tell you that it's not. Persistence matters, and that relationship building matters. So, if it's your legislator, or if it's somebody that you've built a relationship with, and keep coming back and saying, look, I just really want to talk to you about this. I want to give you some more data. I want to tell you some more about what I'm seeing in the classroom, or whatever, and just keep trying, respectfully, of course, not beating them over the head, but continuing to push. um some of the work that we do and that what y'all do is going to be incremental, and so it may be work that isn't done in a single session, and so don't be discouraged by that. We're going to have some new faces come into the legislature, and so then it's building those relationships from scratch all over again. um, but continuing to be persistent when you can get up to the Capitol and there are committee hearings on issues. If you can have somebody from CSAC up at the Capitol, even if they're not testifying, being available to talk to legislators in the hallways, or take notes on the committee hearings, that kind of information can be really useful, because you can follow up. Hey, I heard you said this in committee. And I just want to give you some additional information on this topic. But it's a long game. You really have to think of some of these relationships as a long game, and know that there are going to be, with legislators in particular, they're getting the same type of long game strategy from a lot of different groups. And sometimes those groups are advocating for opposite reactions or responses. So it's a matter of consistency. It's a matter of patience and resolve. But also, you may reach a dead end with some legislators and you just pick up and you continue your work with the other ones. There will almost always be somebody there who is interested and who might be able to help you get a little bit further, move the needle a little bit further down.
For those of us who maybe want to advocate, feel very strongly about the impact of legislation on our schools, but don't see ourselves as political, where would you suggest that they start?
So, and I was telling some librarians this a while back. Like, I'm sure you didn't get into this profession thinking you were going to be in the spotlight of the political arena, but here you are. I think it's very hard to be in education now and not be political. Mm-hmm. I really think that, and through no fault of your own, like none of y'all asked for this. So, there are ways to be involved. Obviously, if you have members who don't themselves want to speak, they can provide feedback to you or, whoever's handling the legislative response or, sort of monitoring the legislation to be shared, as on behalf of the organization, or here's some feedback we're getting from our members. Emails, phone calls to your elected officials are pretty low risk. I mean, you're not going in person, you're not, putting yourself out there. And there's no requirement really that you even have to say, my name is Ashley Hudson. I work at Kutak Rock. This is my home address. I mean, you can just say, hi, I'm Ashley. I'm a constituent, and here's the thing I'm worried about. So there are ways to get involved without getting too deeply involved. But probably the easiest of those is to just send an email and say, here's a thing that I noticed, or here's a bill that I read, and I wanted to provide you my input on it. And that's not really an ask. It may just be informational, but I do encourage everyone, especially anybody in academia right now, to sort of familiarize themselves at least with the process, even if they don't want to engage directly at this point, just so they know what's going on, and to monitor that process. The Arkansas legislature offers live feeds of all of our committee hearings and of our sessions when we go into session, and the recordings are archived. So you can always go back and watch committee hearings and look at the documents that we were presented in that committee hearing so that you can be familiar with what it is that we've been discussing.
We're at this part now, kind of in our world, and it goes through cycles, but we're in a cycle again where students are recognizing the value of being a part of politics as well. So what role do we as educators play in helping students understand civic engagement and the value of their voice? I think they're getting it, but also how can we help to mold that or direct that?
Yeah, and I've got two teenagers, so I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that in real time, which is fascinating, especially in a TikTok world. So I mean, the first thing you can do is model good civic behavior, right? And your engagement, going to vote and telling the kids that you went and voted and what a civic responsibility that is. I think that there is often a knee-jerk reaction to shut kids down if they try to talk about something that is current and that is hard. And I recognize that there are some legislative reasons that educators are worried about addressing current topics. But I think letting the kids speak their minds and kind of work through hard topics and giving them a safe space, whether that's in class time, if you're teaching a civics class or a history class and something comes up, or if they want to come and speak to you one-on-one, just to give them a space to have those conversations and to be heard and treated like their voices matter, because they do. I mean, especially with high school kids, they're only a couple of years away from being voters, and so it's important for them to know the value of their perspective and what they can do they can go and pull these videos. They can look at the documents for the state legislature, and it's a lot easier than trying to look up congressional documents. I will tell you that. But they can figure out, encourage them to contact their elected officials if they have questions. They are allowed to be excused from school if they go to legislative meetings, not to protest. But if they want to go down to the legislature to testify or to see a meeting, that law that passed in the last session allows that to be an excused absence. So if they feel strongly about something and their parents are okay with it, then, they should go to the Capitol and participate in the process or see the process at the very least. But I've been very intentional with my own kids about not discounting their views, even in situations where they say something that I don't agree with, or that I think that's probably a little wrong, and just give them space to be like, what, where did you hear that? Why do you think that? Where else could we look and see if that's been confirmed or verified, and teach them how to be educated, civic members of society. Because there is a lot of misinformation out there right now, and teaching them how to be good at identifying what's real and what's not, especially at this stage, is really critical. Because so often what they're getting, especially just, scrolling through TikTok or Instagram, is not accurate information, and they need to know how to parse that out, just so that they don't go down these rabbit holes.
Well, I tell you that the problem with misinformation is not just one with our students. It's one with
Oh yeah, no, you're right.
entire citizenry, right?
You're right.
We all need to go back to school on that.
Yeah. They have those things every once in a while where you can take the citizenship exam, and we should all probably go back and refresh ourselves on some of those.
Absolutely, yes. Let's look ahead. What do you think about Arkansas education 5 or 10 years from now? Like, what changes would you most like to see?
I would like to, as I said before, I would really like to see the state turn from continuing to just increase the amounts of money that we're spending on the education vouchers, and take a look at what we might be able to do in the public schools, and if there are things that need to be done at that level. I think that if we're talking about competing amongst private and charter and public schools, that we need to make sure that we're at least starting at the same starting line. And if it's a matter of resources not being used correctly in certain school districts or whatever, then we need to address that. But I don't think we need to penalize an entire system based on the perception that a couple of districts may be handling their funds wrong. Because I think our budget at a state level has to match our priorities, and has to, it's a moral document. And so we need to make sure that if we're going to say we prioritize education, we need to understand what that means, and how we're going to prioritize education without just throwing money blindly at a problem. But, if the reading, the reading issues, for example, that's great. I mean, we've identified a problem, but how can we really dig into that? And how can we most effectively ensure that we're improving outcomes? Like, are we looking at Mississippi, for example, to see if we could model some of what they did successfully there and bring it here? What can we be doing better without, and we don't even have to reinvent the wheel on something like that, but we need to be looking at these, individual pieces of education, and kind of taking all of it together and figuring out how best to handle it. So I would hope over the next few years that we start taking a deeper dive into education, which is where having input from the community and from educators and parents would be so critical, so that we can really start to get granular on what issues we need to address, sort of like in a triage fashion. What is the number one thing we need to deal with? What is at the bottom of the list? And let's take them one by one. I don't think that continuing to increase the amount of vouchers is the solution to all of those problems. I think that we need to be targeted and strategic in the approach that we take. So that's what I would like to see, just kind of big picture on the education front, is really, taking these things that we say are important to us. We want the the kids to be able to read. We want them to be college ready or whatever that is. And let's figure out what the path is to get there, as opposed to just, either throwing money at a problem or starving a system and making it impossible to solve the problem. And then saying, look, this problem is really bad and it's all your fault.
Mm-hmm. What do you see right now as the bright spots of our state education system, both on, K through 12 and post-secondary education? What are we doing well?
Yeah. So, our educators are doing a lot really well, especially you can see in Little Rock, we're seeing improved outcomes in some of these schools that have these DF letter grades, where educators are working, really heroically to try to improve education outcomes for these kids. We've seen the city of Little Rock put an investment into providing some additional wraparound services, especially in these underserved areas, which is another area that I think is really critical to better success in education outcomes, because a lot of the kids who struggle the most are coming from impoverished areas. Having access to doctors and dentists and, some stabilization in their family unit and maybe, some job training for parents, all of those types of investments help pay off in education too. And the city has been piloting some programs like that, which I think is great. Obviously, the fact that we're giving kids free breakfast at public schools, I think is great. I think that it helps set the kids up, especially the kids who may be experiencing food insecurity, set the kids up for more success during their day. It's easier to think when your stomach's not empty. And I think that that's great. And I'm hoping in the next session, we can expand that to lunches as well, so that we can ensure that all kids in the state are getting 2 meals a day and not just the one. I have seen, some data that suggests that the investment in these reading navigators has been helpful in some areas. And so I'd like to see, if we need to do more of that, or if there are improvements to the program that we could make. But I think the idea is right, to provide some extra assistance so that we can ensure that these kids can succeed at that. So I think that there are a lot of really good things happening. And of course, we've had schools, especially in Central and Northwest Arkansas, who've performed very well and who've done very well for their students. We see, successful kids graduating in public and private schools, in those two parts of the state in particular. We see some of those kids even coming back into the state. So that investment pays off. So, I think that there are a lot of things that can make us feel very hopeful. And I think that the kids give us a lot of reasons to be hopeful. I mean, every time I go out and talk to kids in elementary or middle or high school, I'm so impressed with them and sort of their worldview and all their little quirks. And I've been trying to decipher their language. And so I'm working on that. But I think that there's a lot to be really proud of. And I think that there's a lot that y'all as educators should be really proud of in the work that you do to give these kids a foundation, especially when you're talking about getting them ready for college and helping them through that process, because having gone through it this year, it is super complicated. But it's exciting to see the number of kids who are interested in taking those next steps too.
Right. In just a minute, we'll open it up to questions from other participants. And if you want to go ahead and if you have questions for Representative Hudson, you can put them in the chat, or you can wait and ask her in person. What does effective leadership look like in this time of rapid change, in your opinion?
So I have always modeled my political career in a way where I ask, would I be proud to tell my kids that I did this? Would I be proud that I told my kid, my kids heard me say this thing? I think that's a good place to start. But I think that being steady and being pragmatic and being willing to compromise on places where you can compromise and fight like hell on things where there is no compromise to be had. But I think it's important to really model moving away from this very personal and ugly style of politics that we've been involved in over the past decade, and model, again, disagreement on policy without, personal attacks and going after people. Kids, especially, I mean, if you think about it, kids have not seen any other style of politics other than what has been going on over the last 10 years with, the insults on social media and, the personal attacks and, the shouting matches. And I would really love to see more focus on bringing back, just the ability to have a conversation, have a disagreement with somebody, and to do that in a way that kids can see and notice. But and adults too. I mean, I think that it's important that we start trying to model the system that we want our system to look like again.
I concur. Last thing before I open it up, if someone in this room or this virtual room remembers only one thing about advocacy after today, what would you want it to be?
Don't be afraid of it. It's scary, and I know that, but don't be afraid of taking those first steps, of sending that email, of reaching out to your legislator and introducing yourself. I mean, don't be afraid to take up the mantle of pursuing issues that are important to you personally and professionally. And remember, especially professionally, you are the subject matter expert. So when you have those conversations, you're coming at it from a position of strength because you know the data, you have the education, you can provide the insight on the things that you see in your job every day. So, own your own strength and own your own power when you have these conversations. We work for you. You're our bosses. So, come into it with that perspective. I think sometimes people's perspective gets skewed on that, but the citizens are the people who should be running the show. And so remember that in all of these. It's not, I promise most of us are not as scary as people think. Like you said, I mean, we're regular people. So don't be afraid to open those conversations and lines of communication.
Well, thank you so much. I know that I am inspired and more empowered to use my voice, and I bet everyone else feels the same. Yeah, let's open it up to questions. You can use the chat, or you can just, turn on your mic and your video and ask away.
I'll jump in and ask a question. And I'm not sure if the participants on the webinar are able to
Oh, okay, my
jump on
bad.
that, but feel free to throw the question in the chat if you do have questions, and please don't hesitate to ask. Um, so the question I have, and it's kind of what you were just talking about. I feel that a lot of people have a desire to advocate, a desire to get their message out, or they feel like, they can watch politics and be the armchair quarterback, but when it comes time to
Yeah.
talk to somebody, it's intimidating. And I feel like a lot of the counselors that I've met with, there's either a fear of retribution, like, oh, this is going to come back to me in a bad way, or it's feeling intimidated, And what I would say about the retribution aspect to it, I think like Tip O'Neill once said, all politics is local, right? It's your right to go talk to your representative. But in terms of the intimidation piece, I remember I was watching an interview with Obama where he was talking about how at first it seemed kind of intimidating to talk to a lot of these executives, a lot of like top level officials. And he basically was like, they all put their pants on the same way I do. And there's nothing intimidating about it. And I come to realize that they're all human and they're just like me. And you were mentioning your daughter saying, well, you should run. And I was wondering if you can kind of like expand more on that story or the moment when you felt like this isn't as intimidating as maybe I'm assuming you thought it was.
Yeah. So, and look, I get it, especially when you're talking about concerns, professionally and how this may affect you. I would say that I believe strongly in the idea of safety in numbers. So the more of you that are speaking out and in one voice and one chorus, the harder it is to go after all of you. So I do think it helps to have an organization like this who's speaking, with a singular mission. um, there's no easy way to jump into this arena, whether that's running for office or deciding to become really politically involved, it's a matter of ripping the Band-Aid off, really.
Mhm.
I mean, and that's kind of what I did. And especially in my first cycle, I mean, I did it without, I almost had to do it without even thinking. Like I just, when I said, okay, I'm going to do this, and, made some decisions pretty quickly, decided I was going to come in. We did a video, we did, press releases, we did all this stuff. And I was like, I'm going to come in hard, and I'm just going to keep my head down and keep working, and really just not think about anything else and not get sidetracked. And that's hard.
Mhm.
And that's hard whether you're running for office or whether you're advocating, because going back to this conversation about the noise and the political environment in general, I 100% understand how hard it is to continue to keep your head down when the opposition is saying awful things about your position or about you.
Mhm.
And it is, some of the things that have been said about me since I first ran for office are honestly so far removed from who I know I am that it is easy for me to say I mean, I don't even know who they're talking about. And so you have to just kind of build up a little bit of an armor. Things that bothered me in 2020 bother me far less now. So some of it is just getting in there and ripping the Band-Aid off and starting the experience. Calling your legislator, going up to the Capitol, sending letters or emails or whatever, and just doing it. I am a perfectionist, and so I will often spend a lot of time, if I'm writing a paper, for example, editing and revising and changing and doing it over and over again. And you can't let, perfect be the enemy of good. So once you decide on an approach and a message, it's time to get that message out there, because you can always work on amending or adapting your message as things change. But if you sit at home and continuously get in your own head, um, nothing's going to change, right? You're never going to get your message out there, because you are going to just be sitting at home frozen, worried about how that might be perceived or how you might be perceived. But if what you're working on is important to you, my advice would be to just do it. Just go ahead and get that out there, and understand that it is vulnerable to do it. But if it's a valuable issue for you, then, rip that Band-Aid off.
Yeah, I think it goes back to this whole notion of if not me, then who?
That's right.
So, I don't know if you said your husband is a former Marine. There's the Travis Manion Foundation, and it's kind of their motto. I'm a former Marine as well, by the way.
Okay.
Simplify to your husband. But other question I had was, you know, going back to this whole notion of if not me, then who? We are subject matter experts as counselors, um, and you're handling hundreds of issues, right? And you don't have a staff, and you're, a one-person show representing, your area. Going back to the example that you gave with the veterans incarceration bill and trying to get public feedback, you know, like, can you talk a little bit more about like maybe some examples of how you would welcome the type of help, to really get something going? So I remember working on Capitol Hill. If like someone came with like, here's some proposed legislative language, and then here's a couple letters from veteran service organizations that support this, and like, wow, you've done my work for me, and this is going to make it a lot easier to get this through.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that and like how we could tangibly like do that to like kind of assist rather than just like sharing our voice?
Yeah. No. So, especially if you're talking about at the stage where there's been a bill proposed, and so there's a draft, and that's, being floated around either before filing or after filing, but before it's really moved through the process. I have benefited several times from, organizations who reach out to me and say, "Hey, um, we're SACSAC or CSAC, or how do you do this?
Say,
SACSAC? SACAC?
say
SACAC.
CAC.
SACAC. Yeah, we're SACAC, and here's what we do. And, we love your legislation, or we hate your legislation, or whatever. And here are some thoughts that we have. In addition, here's a study that we commissioned last spring, or here's a study that we want to make you aware of from our national organization that they've done. And so we think that in looking at that with the language in this bill, that maybe if you made some revisions in this section, it might make sense. That stuff's great. And it really is, just because, like I said, with the veterans bill, but also with, I did a bill to get lactation coverage, lactation consultant coverage. I got feedback from several different organizations that represent lactation consultants all over the country that really helped me get the lingo right for the different levels of certification, that I think made that a better bill. And so, those types of conversations, for the most part, are really welcomed, because, our legislation gets better if we lock it up. I mean, we want the language to make sense, and we want the process to make sense, because if we're drafting a bill that affects you and you say this isn't going to work and here's why, most legislators are going to be open to hearing those whys, and even more open to, hey, and I've got an idea to fix it. So yeah, I encourage that whenever you can.
Mm.
Go off camera for just a second. I will still be on, so you can keep talking to me, but I just realized that my cord is downstairs, and I don't want you to see all of the construction that's happening. So we can keep talking. I'm just walking downstairs.
Okay. Um, I was going to ask, the other question was, so there's good policy making like you're describing, which is, receiving public feedback to kind of improve a bill, to take considerations that maybe you don't see or another entity sees. And I agree that that's really good policy making. But I think the other question that, for a bill to pass, it has to be politically feasible. And I think political feasibility is kind of a scary thing nowadays in today's politics, especially here in Arkansas, with certain topics. What aspects can advocates help to make things more politically feasible? You know, um, how are certain ways that they could help? Help build a coalition or help get something passed.
Hold on.
Sure.
Okay. So, so I think that when you're talking about feasibility, I mean, one of the biggest things is to look around and see who else might be interested in the issue. I mean, if you team up with other organizations, other educator organizations, the librarians associations, whoever, administrators, and you're able to come together as sort of a single voice and say, we're all interested parties, we're all subject matter experts, we come from different perspectives, but we all agree on X or Y. Um, that helps. Going back to what I was saying earlier about safety in numbers. I mean, the more you can get coalitions to agree with you, I think the more powerful it is, and also it becomes harder for legislators to ignore. I think that in that respect, if you've got something that you feel like might be especially contentious or challenging, look around and think about who else might be affected by that thing, and try to get them on board for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. Those are my questions. I really enjoyed hearing everything you had to say. Um, I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. But Sarah?
Yeah. As we wrap up today's conversation, Representative Hudson, I just wanted to thank you again for joining us, sharing your time, your experiences, your thoughtful perspective on advocacy and civic engagement. This just helps remind us that meaningful change happens when we all come together, right? When we're willing to listen, engage, and work toward a better future. So, on behalf of SACAC, thank you uh, for taking the time out of your busy morning to be with us. And I know we're not ending our session, but I do want to, while I have the platform, just thank everyone for being here today and for the work that we are all doing every day on behalf of students and families. So thank you for that. And so we'll transition to the next part of our webinar, and I'll turn things over to Steve.
Awesome.
Thanks all. I really appreciated it. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm just gonna share my screen real quick. Oops. Okay. Do you see this? Okay, perfect. All right. That was a wonderful session with Representative Ashley Hudson. I hope you all got something really good out of that. I sure did. And Sarah, thank you so much for moderating that part of it. Well, what a great segue to go into Advocacy 101, kind of building off of what Ms. Hudson was talking about. So today I'm just going to go over, I think, some like simple points that I think will be further strengthened by what you just heard. And a little bit about my background. Um, I worked on Capitol Hill in both the House of Representatives and in the Senate. I have a master's in public policy. This is advocacy is something that I'm very passionate about. Um, I am a political junkie. Um, I have worked in the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. I also worked with congressmen on the Armed Services Committee in the House. So seeing it from the other side of the desk, receiving the 10 to 20 meetings a day from a variety of different constituents and advocates and lobbyists. I'm going to share my insight from that perspective, which is fantastic after the conversation we just had. And so let me go ahead and jump in. Why do I advocate? Um, I feel like a lot of people, when they hear the word advocacy, they're often picturing lobbyists in expensive suits in DC. Yeah, and sometimes that can be the case. But I think advocacy simply is just professionals using their expertise to influence decisions that affect their communities. Getting the message out there. Um, and so let me move this over here. Um, So today we're going to talk about three things: what advocacy really is, how the Arkansas legislative process works, and then lastly, why your story matters, and more than you might think. Um, so I have seen how decisions are made on Capitol Hill that might shock you, and I would say it all boils down to what's the best story to tell, because stories sell, and elections matter. And that sounds kind of jaded, maybe, but it is reality. And so that's why your story really matters, to move the needle for their constituents. Um, so the overview that we're going to have today is really to kind of show the process. I think it's really good to understand the system that's at play. And then that way you know where and when and who to engage if you really want to move the needle in public policy. I'll share some tools and resources as well, and some of NACAC's policy pillars that we are aligned with NACAC in terms of the type of advocacy that we do in SACAC. So, what is a legislative advocacy? Simply, it's ensuring that laws align with the lived realities of your students and the lived realities of us as educators, and getting those stories shared, right? If you go to the federal level where there are staffs available, you'll have staff members that have a certain portfolio that cover education or higher education, and knowing who those people are and having a simple conversation with them. Um, for example, I work with Trio. Trio was facing some major cuts in the last president's budget. They wanted to get rid of all of Trio. So there was a big push to advocate to keep Trio. And the simplest thing that we did was to reach out to our congressman, Congressman French Hill's office. And we made connections with his education staffers to kind of figure out where they're at with things, what questions do they have. And we gave them a lot of information in terms of statistics here in Arkansas and how it impacts first generation students and how it impacts the development of our economy. So we're arming them with talking points and resources that they can use to kind of help convince, their side of the aisle to help their own constituents out because they have to play politics. And I think that's something that advocates have to understand is that it is a political game. Now that may be intimidating and scary to some people, but that political game can be played a lot easily if they have stories, right? And if you just focus on your stories and keep it real, that'll really help out those legislators, advocate for what you're looking for. Um, you know, policy formation does not happen in a vacuum. Okay. If you're not in the room or if you're not influencing anything, someone else is doing it. Okay. And in some cases, it might be other entities that have goals that counter, what it is that we want, right? Or they might not know what they don't know. So it's important to understand that when we're thinking about advocacy, it's not just changing a law. We can help change regulations. We can help resource allocation, right? When they have the budget bills go out or appropriations bills go out, we can influence how resources are distributed. We can raise awareness and generate public support on important issues we face, leading to more informed and engaged communities that can help build coalitions to influence change. As Miss Hudson said, it's more the merrier. The larger your numbers, the easier it's going to be to get the policy goals that we're looking for. And by us representing our cause, it ensures diverse voices and perspectives are being considered. It also provides effectiveness. You heard her talking about the veterans incarceration bill and getting public feedback. What's the best way to create this policy that can really be more effective for veterans not having any recidivism, right? Hearing from the stakeholders that are us in education is going to be very important to make policies more effective, right? Not to get too political, but if she's talking about a LEARNS Act that had 200 pages that got passed in 2 weeks, there might not have been that many stakeholders' voices that were able to be heard, right? And so that's why it's important. That's another reason, our voices matter. Um, the next thing is, I went back and I asked her, if not me, then who? Um, and the biggest myth that I hear from counselors is, I'm not a policy person. And I say, you are policy people. You just don't use that language. You advocate every day. You just call it doing your job, right? You're advocating for students every day. You care about the outcome for students, right? Just share that story. Share that story with people who are making significant changes here in our state or at the federal level, right? And just by simply sharing that story and bringing other stories together, um, can make us change agents. Um, so I really believe in building coalitions and networks can really strengthen in numbers. I remember working on a bill when I was on Capitol Hill that was helping Gold Star families. Gold Star families and also family members of service members who died from their from being disabled. And it's a little bit of a complicated issue, but there was a payment that they would receive, and there was kind of a loophole that didn't allow them to get that payment. And for 20 years, they were trying to work to fix this issue. And I think what helped move the needle, where they finally were able to pass this law, was that different coalitions that kind of had competing demands came together, and they leveraged the media, and they went full force on a take Capitol Hill Day and really got a lot of co-sponsors for this bill in a way that moved the needle enough where they passed the law for the first time in 20 years. And so uh, strengthening the impact by our coalition can only be done by sharing those stories. So I'm kind of going to get into a little bit of the Schoolhouse Rocks, what makes a bill become a law type of thing here, but kind of do it Arkansas style. Um, and not to insult anyone's intelligence, I'm sure we've all received Civics 101. But just understand that the Arkansas legislative process is very similar to the U.S. Congress's process, right? There's a few nuances that are different, but basically you have two chambers. You have a House of Representatives with 100 members. That's where Ms. Hudson works, and then you have the Senate side. The Arkansas General Assembly has two types of sessions. Um, they have a regular session where they pass laws, and they have a fiscal session where they're, um, matching money to programs. The governor can call for a special session during certain time periods, depending on what the issue may be. And the leadership in the Arkansas General Assembly is the lieutenant governor is the president of the Senate. So kind of like the vice president is the president of the U.S. Senate. And then the House Speaker, elected by the body of the House, it's kind of like the Speaker of the House in the U.S. Congress. Okay, so pretty similar structure. Um, like I was saying, it's if you want to become an effective advocate, it's really important to understand the system that you're trying to influence. Okay. This complicated chart here, I'm not going to get into because I think I would put everyone to sleep and everybody would go away from this webinar. But let's take this craziness that you see here and let's simplify it. Okay. And I'm going to use U.S. Congress's method of passing a law. And like I said, I'm not here to insult anyone's intelligence. It's just I want to show you the different stages where you as an advocate can help make change. Okay. So an idea comes about either by a congressman, a senator, a constituent, an advocate, a lobbyist, and they introduce a bill. Okay, they write the legislative language, they try to figure out the best policy for it. They might get some public feedback. They might try to get some support letters from different entities to make that bill a little bit stronger so it can get through the system. Okay, you're trying to give this bill some credibility, and some strength before it gets to the next level. So let's say a congressman introduces it and it goes to a committee, right? There are several standing committees that oversee certain jurisdictions, okay? And so the one representing education, if it goes there, the committee members will review that bill. How do they review that bill? In the U.S. Congress, they have staffers that do that work, right? They'll review the bill. They understand the priorities of their bosses, as well as the chair and the ranking member. Here in Arkansas, and I'll show you the members of the committees, the fact that they have smaller staffs who are going to be more administrative in nature. You really got to talk to the representatives themselves who are in committee. If you're talking to the federal level, you can talk to the staff members and develop a relationship with them. Okay. My best bills that I was able to push to my boss were the ones that had a lot of folks reaching out to me, from the public, giving me a lot of resources to be able to get that out. Because the staffers are very busy. The committee will vote on the bills, and this is what we call the markup. That's when they're gonna like line things out, they're gonna amend things, and then if they pass it, it'll go to the next level. All right. Sometimes it'll go straight to the floor of the House, or it might go to a larger committee before it goes to the floor. Okay. And now let's say it survives and it gets to the floor of the House. Now you got to think as an advocate, who are some of the key players that can influence large buckets of votes? Right. Let's see if we can get support from them. Let's see if we can talk to their staffers. Who are some people that we know that know them? And once the vote is passed, well, unfortunately, you got to do the same thing on the other side. The same process in the Senate. If one comma is missed in one bill and the other, it has to be fixed. Okay, it has to be the exact same bill, has to be passed from both sides before it goes to be signed by the president. Okay, so that's essentially how this works. Very similar to Arkansas before it gets to the governor. Of course, the governor has veto power. So does the president. But supermajorities can override those vetoes. So there's your civics lesson 101. Here in Arkansas, Um, here are, and I just updated this, but here from the General Assembly, the Education Committee, here's your chair and your vice chair. So Representative Keith Brooks and Britt McKenzie. And then more specifically for us who are working on college access, higher education subcommittee, these are your folks. You can find this information. If you Google the Arkansas General Assembly's website, and you'll look at a link for the different committees, and then you find the education one. If you really wanted to get in there and make your voice heard, these are some of the folks that you can reach out to. They have their phone numbers and their email addresses. And you are, you're a citizen of Arkansas. Get your voice heard and don't hesitate to reach out to them. They would love to hear from you. There's also the Arkansas Legislative Council. This is kind of what Ashley Hudson was talking about, where they'll meet and greet with folks. And for the higher education one, these are your co-chairs and vice chairs. Okay. So how do I talk to a legislator? Um, this was the question that I was asking Miss Hudson, the intimidation piece, right? I remember my first time meeting my boss, Senator Tesser of Montana, and I was intimidated to go into his office. And in mid conversation, a guy barges in, sits on the couch, and it's Bernie Sanders. And this is like right after the 2016 election. And I'm just like starstruck. And I'm listening to them have a conversation, and they're just having a regular conversation, just like two old pals. And it was at that moment I started realizing, like, these are regular folks. Um, of course, I had, paid my respect to them and everything, and I was definitely very intimidated. But what I realized over time is that these are passionate public servants on both sides of the aisle. Okay. They might have different opinions. There are a lot of political aspects that are influencing the way we see things. And I won't get into that. But I will say, on both sides of the aisle, if you sat down in their office in private, they want to hear your voices. So just like you would talk to any other professional or colleague is the way you could talk to a legislator. And they want to hear from you because they know that you're an expert in your field, right? They want to pass good policy, right? And might be aligned with their politics, but they do want to pass the best policy they can, right? And they want it to be able to pass, right? They don't want to waste their time on bills that don't have a chance. So when you do meet with them, keep your coordination with them and their staff simple. Make it easier for them. All right. These are very busy people. And Arkansas legislators are doing part-time, so they have their full-time jobs as well, as you heard Ms. Hudson say. But I think the one thing that'll stick with them are stories. Okay. Just like Ms. Hudson was talking about, I believe it was a member from the trans community, if I remember correctly, saying, why are you guys hurting my friends? Right. That stuck with her. Okay. Those types of stories can stick with, legislators and can really change things. So for legislative meetings, I'm just going to kind of walk you through really quickly on how to prepare for the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting. Um, and what I would say about this is the main thing is know what you're asking. Know your ask. Okay. I think the benefit of talking to your legislators here in Arkansas is that it's so local and so personal that you can develop that rapport because they're looking for your votes. Um, but if you really want to try to push something, know what you're asking for. Do your research. I say strategize your conversation, but just prepare for the conversation, right? Um, Keep it simple. Tell your story mainly, and then make sure that your ask is there, right? It's almost like creating an elevator pitch, right? Like I tell students, the elevator pitch coming from, a salesman jumps in an elevator in New York City going up the skyscraper, and he's got 30 seconds to sell something to a top executive before they get to the very top floor, right? The guy's busy, but if you can, sell him that next meeting, that's a great elevator pitch. I think with legislators, they want to hear you, but they're also very busy. So if you can share a story that sticks and make your ask simple to understand, that can go a very long way. Here are some tools and resources here, and this is something that we can share as well. Um, NACAC Advocacy, they have a lot of their pillars that they advocate for, and they have different policy briefs in there that you can use. Of course, we have our government relations page, as well as a lot of these type of events that are recorded. So you can also see what other states are doing as well. Um, you can also take a look at the Arkansas Department of Higher Education's current policies, the Arkansas Joint Committee on Higher Education. Um, if you really wanted to get out there to the state capitol to know when to go to some of these committee meetings, I would encourage you to look at the state legislator calendars and meetings. And there's a link to that here. Um, and lastly, like if you wanted to do some research to understand an issue a little bit more deeply and really more at the national level, the Congressional Research Service, I can't speak highly enough about it. They have free reports that are concise, easy to understand. They're made for policymakers, they're made for politicians, but they do have deep research, and the people that work at the Congressional Research Service are all PhD level experts in a variety of topics. Working on Capitol Hill, one of the things I used to love doing was calling CRS and asking for some information, and it was kind of like a living Google. So a lot of the research is free online. And if there's a topic that you care about, Google Congressional Research Service and the topic, and there's probably going to be a white paper with really great information. So once you get that meeting scheduled and you're in the meeting, of course, introduce yourself, where, who you are and what your story is. Um, and then give your ask, right? These meetings can be about 5 minutes long with the policymaker sometimes, because they have very busy schedules. So being able to give them some literature, maybe something concise, like a one pager, can be very helpful. Um, or giving them a copy of your story with the ask can also be very helpful. Something they can incorporate in some future talking points or a speech. Um, but the bottom line is that you want to hook them with a story and then leave them with the ask. And I would take it a step further too. If that ask deals with legislation, what can you do to make their lives easier? That's always a question that I love getting from folks. And I would tell them straight up, I need more support from this. Are there any other organizations that you can have like letters of support from? Um, you know, there's this one part of the legislation that I don't understand. Can you explain it to me? Are there other folks that can provide more insight about this one area that might become politically contentious, right? So if you can help them with that, because you are the subject matter experts in your areas, that can, move the process a little bit faster. Um, it is a slow process, an act of Congress. Um, After the meeting, I think what's always great, the people that I always remembered were the ones that would send me a thank you card. Um, and you want to continue the relationship. Don't hesitate to reach out to them. Hey, just circling back about the topic that we discussed. I was wondering if anything has changed about it. Hey, could we have another, coffee meeting? Okay. Just to keep the issue alive. And I don't want to belabor this point too much, but own your authority. Okay. No offense to Miss Hudson, but politicians are experts in getting elected. Okay. They're representatives. They're there to represent their constituents. Okay. And they want to support them. And the more they support them, that those are votes. Okay. That's how representation works. Um, but just understand that they're experts in getting elected. You're the expert in education access. And those legislators need us. They need to hear our stories. And as constituents, you do have power, right? She was talking about, her first election and how votes matter, right? And how she didn't concede and waited, and um, that's an election example, but um, you'd be shocked to see the like more people that support an issue, you know, can make change happen despite how polarized our politics are. So here's just a little bit of advice from other folks that have done advocacy. Um, so if you're the person that wants to start advocating more in the professional role, what advice would you have for them? And here it's change is slow. Do not get discouraged if things do not change immediately. There is a lot of red tape in the world of higher education that sometimes can slow down the processes. However, there are also lots of other advocates who can help speed up processes if given the opportunity. This is one of my old professors, Marshall Gantz. He was one of the organizers for Cesar Chavez for the labor movement, and he also was one of the organizers with Martin Luther King. And he would say movements have narratives. They tell stories because they are not just about rearranging politics. They also rearrange meaning, and they're not just about redistributing the goods. They're about figuring out what is good. And one of the things that he would teach us, that I'm about to get into, was like how to tell the public narrative. For the person who wants to start advocating more in their professional role, what advice do you have for them? Personalize your message. Nothing glazes over legislators and aides' eyes faster than a form letter or a canned repeated message. That is so true. That is so true. You can see people kind of like lean in when a story starts. So this is something from Marshall Gantz's class I took. He talks about the story of self, the story of us, the story of now. The story of self is why do you care? The story of us is why should we care? And the story of now is why does it matter today? Okay. Very simply, I could use the example. I work with Mamás Unidas, and Sandra is going to talk about Mamás Unidas. And story of self, why do I care? My mother's from Peru, the son of an immigrant. I have seen firsthand, the challenges and barriers that first generation students face, especially in the Hispanic community. Why should we care? There's a growing demographic of Hispanic students and a lot of first generation students that want to go to college. And why does it matter today? Because access for them is very difficult, probably even more so now with today's politics, you know, and so helping them out would be very beneficial. Okay, it's a very simple example that resonates, personally to me. And then I would, you know, add my ask after that, whatever that ask is. Okay. So I would encourage you to, if you're going to talk to a policymaker, what's the story of self? What's your story? What's the story of a lot of us that kind of resonate with your story, right? More numbers matter, right? And then what's the story of now? Why is it urgent now? Right? If you can combine those with your ask, I think you got a phenomenal elevator pitch. So, what is most important thing to know when it comes to advocacy? Anyone can advocate. You are the expert, and 99.9% of the time, you have more experience in your field than legislators. Just keep the step to get involved and letting go of feeling like I was not qualified was a first key step. So don't feel intimidated. Don't put these politicians on a pedestal by any means. Okay. How do you feel most effective in your advocacy work? Every conversation matters and can make a difference in advocacy work. Advocacy work is never complete and it should be viewed as building blocks. It takes time. I gave you the example of the Gold Star families and how it took 20 years to get this one payment thing in legislation. There were roadblocks. There were new legislators coming in that had to be, educated on the issue. It was a very wonky issue. But over time, the building blocks grew enough where they were able to pass that law. Um, so understand to be patient with this process. Okay. So the question I would ask all of you is, who do you advocate for? Keep that in mind, right? It's who we work for every day. All right. Here are some of the NACAC policy pillars that you can find. And there, and I remember they used to have a great Twitter. I can't remember the name of it, but it was the NACAC one, and it would give you all the updates on higher education policy that they were tracking. Um, but student equity centered admission practices. Okay, that's what SACAC believes in. Professional responsibility and ethics for college admissions counseling professionals. I definitely think that's a given. Um, and expansion of capacity and impact of school counselors and college advisors. That's why we have these drive-in workshops. That's why we have a lot of the initiatives that we have, is to help educate school counselors and college advisors. Um, all right, student equity centered admission practices as well. This is coming from NACAC. Um, and then ethics in college admission counseling and support for school counselors and college advising. So just a little more bullet points here. Reducing student to counselor ratios. Gosh, I would love to see that. Um, if only there was more money to be able to bring in more counselors. Providing best practice information in the state and local setting. Training practitioners and equipping schools to meet college advising needs of students. Okay. And here's some of the things that NACAC supports. Right. So if these are some issues that you wanted to advocate on, NACAC would probably write you a support letter. Okay. So, oh, there it is right there. NACAC Wonk. If you want to stay up to date, that's a great Twitter handle. They do provide policy alerts and, they have a good bulletin and journal to keep up to date with the latest issues. With that, I will open up to any questions. If anybody has any questions, I don't think I see any in the chat. Anything you would like to say, Sarah?
I'll just say that later on, you're going to have to tell me more about Bernie Sanders.
Uh, yeah. It was funny. I was just like, whoa. I was very starstruck. And he's a really funny guy too. Um, so sorry, I'm just texting the next speaker. But yeah, no, he was absolutely fantastic. And so with that, I hope you guys don't feel intimidated to get out and speak. If at least a phone call to folks about the issues that you care about. Um, and I'm looking to see if our next speaker is here yet. I just texted her. Oh, there she is. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. So I just finished my part on advocacy. And I'll go ahead and introduce. Are you ready, Sandra?
Yeah.
Okay, so Sandra Carmona Job, she works at Trio as a community outreach manager, correct?
Yes.
And then she's also the vice president of Mamás Unidas. So she's got a wonderful presentation, and you can go ahead and share your screen if you want. I just give you access to it. All right, it's all yours.
Are you able to see my screen? The
Yes.
right one? Okay. Hi, everyone. Like Steve said, my name is Sandra Carmona Job. I am currently my full-time job, the community outreach manager for the TRIO programs here at UA Little Rock. And then what I like to call hobby, which is almost like a full-time job, is with Mamás Unidas nonprofit. I'm the vice president for it, but more recently, I'm shifting roles into the development director, which hopefully can help the organization grow more. But today, the presentation, I'm excited to talk to you about these two programs that support underserved students here in Arkansas. So I'll go through it. Do not hesitate to ask questions on the chat or stop me if you have any additional questions. I'll start first introducing Trio and what that is, and then I'll jump into Mamas Unidas. But they go hand in hand because the goal for both of them is to help low income, a lot of times first generation students get into college, so that access to higher education. So let's see. So a little bit about me. I was born in Mexico. It's called Guanajuato, which you can see it right here in orange. So right in the middle of Mexico. I migrated to the US at the age of 9. I think I was a little younger than 9 here. I think I took this picture in Mexico, but it wasn't far before I moved to the US. So I grew up here in Little Rock. We moved straight to Little Rock, and I was in Southwest Little Rock, and I'm still in the area. I I don't know if anybody recognized this photo, but that's at Little Rock Central High. That's where I graduated from. And during this time, it was very stressful once I was a senior, trying to get into college. And that's kind of what transformed my mission, my personal mission and passion of higher education access. So during this time as a senior, I had a 4 point plus GPA. I was on top of my class. I had tons of community service. I was involved in clubs and all around, I was a great student. I know I'm biased, but at least that was my profile. And one thing that was stopping me from getting into college was one, at that time I was a DACA student. I don't know if you guys are familiar with DACA, but it's a immigration status where you come undocumented and you receive or you get protection and are able to go to college. But it was fairly new at that time. It passed in 2012, and I graduated in 2013. So it was fairly new. So the colleges had no idea how to navigate that system and how DACA worked at that time. So it was like, go to the international office. No, you go to the regular admissions office, and like you qualify for in-state tuition. No, you don't. You do out-of-state. And wait a minute, it's international, so it's triple the cost. So it was a lot of confusion and stress. I remember crying, like I did all this my whole 4 years of college, of high school, and now I can't even get into college. But during that time, the community came together for me and they provided resources literally like that summer. And I was able to start at UA Little Rock. And even that first semester, I was able to get a refund check. And somebody, like literally a random person from like Chicago, sent me a laptop because a teacher knew him, and teachers were getting money out of their own pockets to help me go to college. So that's where my passion to help others started, because I saw how the community cared for me, a student that was at that time undocumented, low income, first generation. My parents didn't even graduate elementary school. So it was big for me, and it really impacted the rest of my life and my career, really, to where I am now. So I started UA Little Rock. I graduated in 3.5 years and working full time to pay the rest of college. And then right after I graduated, like literally 2 weeks later, I started to work with the TRIO programs. And this photo, that's like really early on when I started. During my time there, let me back up a little bit. The reason why I started a trio is because during my undergrad program, I didn't know what I wanted to do. It's like I got into college and I'm like, wait, what do I even want to major in? Like, I don't even know. I just, the only thing in my head was, let me get into college. And now I'm here and I don't know what I want to do. So during that time, I was doing a practicum, like an internship, and I was going back to Central and helping students that wanted to get into college because I wasn't the only one in that situation. So I was helping them. And then one day I ran into my trio counselor because I'm a trio alumni. I'll explain a little bit more about trio, but I ran into her and I had this epiphany of like, wait a minute, I love what I'm doing right now of helping students get in college. I'm enjoying that whole process. And you're saying I could get paid to do this because she's a trio counselor. That's what she was doing. She was getting paid. So I could do that too. And she said, well, you need your master's to be in the program, to apply for trio. So that's why, I started to work at Trio. She found me a job there, but then I started to work on my master's. And while I was working full time, I was also going to school full time, and I was able to graduate with my master's in higher education student affairs. So since then, I've been working with Trio. I took a little break per se. I went to work at a charter school for about 2.5 years, but then I came back because my heart kept saying, hey, you need to serve students in general in the community, not just stuck to one school in particular. So I came back, and then that's when Mamas Unidas also started to kick up more or take off more. There's a photo of me for an event that we had. So now where I am, just to summarize everything, still very passionate about the helping underserved students through Trio and Mamas Unidas. And then I have a 10-month-old that's keeping me busy. This is my family here. So now let me tell you about what Trio is and Mamas Unidas and how they all align with my personal mission and trying to balance that with the family and all that. So Trio programs are federally funded programs from the Department of Education. So these Trio programs came about in 1964 as a response to the war on poverty by President Johnson. So this came about. They wanted to uplift the people that were living in poverty, and the way they wanted to do that was through education. Why are they called the TRIO programs? It's because they started out with 3 type of programs. Now there's 8, and all of these programs, they serve slightly different students, but like some of them do veterans, others do high school students, other programs do college students, and then we have others that work just with adults, but all of them, their end goal is to provide access to higher education and for low-income first-generation students. So I want to show you really quick. Let me see if it lets me click. Are you still able to see my screen where it says Trio History, the website? If I can get a thumbs up from anybody.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, like I said, started in 1964 for us, the war on poverty, and they started with the upper bound. Like I said, there's 8 now, but they started with 3 types of programs. Upper bound was the first one, and then they introduced student support services. So upper bound is more like they do heavy summer programs, and then throughout the school year with students to prepare them for college. So they work at the high schools. The student support, then they had Talent Search. Talent Search, they do workshops throughout the year at high schools. and they select certain high schools in the grant, like they put the high schools they'll work with, and then they're there, but it's also they do some middle school, so like seventh grade through 12th grade, and they go and do workshops and field trips and things like that. And then they had the student support services, which is another the third program, and that's for college students. So once the other ones are pre-college, they help them get in college, and then this one is for students that are already in college, and we want to make sure they stay there and graduate. So after that, I won't go over this whole timeline, but they began to introduce the other trio programs like Veteran Upper Bound. So just like the Upper Bound to promote access to higher education, but for veterans. Then they have Education Opportunity Center. That's where I have the most experience in that I work with, which is specifically working with adults, low-income first-generation adults, to get them into school. And then they had McNear, which is for students wanting to go get their graduate degree. So they help them from their undergrad to their graduate program. And then the other ones, different variations like the Upper Bound, but focus on math and science and so on. So that's how we ended up with 8 type of different programs that are part of TRIO. But TRIO is because of the original 3. And like I said, they're federally funded. As of right now, there are about 3,400 project sites. So as you can see here on the map, they're all over the U.S. There's also some in Puerto Rico, Guam, and other parts that belong to the U.S. And we have several. You can even see the state of Arkansas right there, but because we have quite a bit of TRIO programs here in Arkansas. And just wanted to kind of mention again the type of students that we serve. We serve students that are low income. It's usually it's like below 150% of the poverty line set by the federal state. Those that are first generation, meaning they're the first ones in their family to go to college, and then 6th through 12th grade and adults. Here are some of the services that are offered across all programs. And of course, each program has more specific services, but mainly they will be like workshops to give them information about financial aid, college admissions, preparing for that. We literally sit down with them and help them complete the FAFSA or the college applications or whatever it is. So we really take them by the hand. Some of the programs offer tutoring, others do college tours, and so on. So there's a lot of services all around preparing them for college. So in Arkansas, we have 82 TRIO programs, and it might be a little more as of this finding, because I know some of them just opened up. Like, for example, Pulaski Tech just had a new TRIO program. So, but as of this information that I found, we have 82 TRIO programs serving over 25,000 individuals in the state of Arkansas. If after this you need more information about the TRIO programs and where they're located and where you can find them to see if your students could benefit from them or you want to bring them to your school, I will leave this link or not. Hold on, let me see. I don't know why it didn't work. Interesting. Well, I'll share that link with Steve and he can share it with you. But basically, it's a PDF document that has the list of all the colleges that have the TRIO programs, because the TRIO programs are usually housed by a college. So now I want to talk specifically about the TRIO programs that I work with, like our department, we're housed at UA Little Rock, so they're the ones that receive the grants. We currently have here within our department, for the pre-TRIO programs, 7 programs. And on campus, there's, I believe, 2 more TRIO programs, but they're college TRIO. And like I said, we're pre-college. We have 3 EOCs, which is the ones that work with adults. As you can see, there's one that serves the North Central. There's another one in the Central Arkansas, and then the Delta area. Then we have the Upper Bound and Talent Search, and those serve high school students and middle school students. And here you can see what areas those are, and I labeled them on the map as well. Let me see. I think I had, yeah. So, all the services that we offer are similar to the ones I mentioned earlier, with the college applications, financial aid, workshops, field trips, and things like that to prepare them for college. And I'm trying to remember, last year, I believe we served over 7,000 students. The EOCs, we're required to serve about 1,000 each for each year. And then the Upper Bound and Talent Search have their own numbers too. So another part of TRIO for our department, and what I mainly focus on and work on, is the community outreach. We started this project of an app about 3 years ago now, and we knew that for students to be able to go to college, especially low-income first generation, there's a lot of barriers that they face. A lot of times that could be, they're homeless, or they don't have home stability, or food insecurity. Arkansas has one of the biggest food insecurity, or the parental arrangements, or just life situations. So before a student can even think about college, they want to make sure they have their basics taken care of. And a way for us to try to not necessarily fix that program, but assist with that problem, it was to create this app that that houses all these resources for the students. And I encourage you to download it, especially if you deal with students that are oftentimes in need of these resources, or anybody really. It's EOC at LR. You can download it on the Google Play or Apple Store, and you can see there like all the services that are on there. And of course, we also post a lot of college and career resources and content. But we try to put as much information on there that the students, the clients can access to help maybe alleviate some of the barriers that they're facing that's stopping them from getting into college. And that's what I run. A big part of my job, putting those resources together and keeping the app updated, as well as social media, and then of course networking in the community. So that's what I have for TRIO. Any questions so far before I jump into what Mamás Unidas does? I was trying to check the chat. Okay. All right, so I'll move on to Mamás Unidas. And this, like I said, it's like my hobby, but it's really a full-time job that I don't get paid for. So Mamás Unidas, our mission is to empower families in Central Arkansas, especially those that are low-income first generation, and our focus is with Spanish-speaking families. We help them navigate the post-secondary education through guidance, education, and resources that prepare the students for college, but also, very importantly, strengthen the parents' ability to support their success. Because with the Hispanic families, it's a family affair, right? So you can't just take the student and try to lead them if you don't have the parents on board. So it's a whole family approach to ensure that they're all on the same page. And that has proven very successful so far. How did Mamás Unidas start? So in 2017, there was a group of moms that there were friends. It was 7 moms that wanted their children to go to college. They all had like seniors or high school students, and they didn't know how to help them because one, they had limited English. They did not graduate high school or even elementary school. They had limited resources and they didn't understand the American system. So they had all those various barriers, but they wanted their kids to go to college. So they started to sit down and share information. They'll go to like McDonald's or Panera Bread and share the limited information that they had, like a scholarship or any requirements for a college, things like that, right? So at that time, like I said, I was with the TRIO programs and I heard of this group of moms and I went and did a presentation on the services that we offer and how we could help them. And that day I left so inspired by these moms because that's something that I wish my parents would have had or the support I would have had because I had to navigate everything on my own, like I mentioned before. So I kept in touch with them, and through the many conversations we had, we knew that we needed to do something because there was a need in the community. We knew that. So we put a workshop together. At that time, still a group of individuals, not an organization or anything, but we put a workshop together. We had no expectations. We didn't know how many people were coming. Micah, which is the president of the organization, always says that it was a rainy day. So, we're like, nobody's coming. Well, on that day, we had over 100 people that showed up to this workshop of us talking about access to college. So we were mind blown. We knew we needed to become an organization to meet this need, this great need that was in the community. This is the photo back here. You can see me kind of presenting. And then we had these people, and then you can't see the rest of the photo, but this other area was full of people too. So we knew that if we wanted to move forward with this, we needed to become official and become a nonprofit to do all this the right way. So that's when we started the process, and now 8 years later, we're an official nonprofit. I'll tell you a second all the services that we offer. I wanted to, before I go more into details on our services and stuff, I wanted to show you a video so you can see the impact that we're having. But I know when I shared it, it didn't give me the option to share with sound. So let me give it a try and see if you guys can hear. If not, I can see what we can do. So hold on. Mamás Unidas started in 2000. Can you guys hear that?
Yes, I can hear it.
Okay.
The group of
Mamás Unidas started in 2017 with a group of moms that wanted their children to go to college, but they had limited resources. They didn't understand the language. They didn't understand the American educational system. All they knew is they wanted to help their children. So they started to gather to see how they could help their kids, whether it was shared scholarships or any.
Can't hear it.
Hey, Sandra, it cut out for a second.
So a limited information that they could find. The first meeting that we had for the community, we weren't expecting a lot of people, and we had over 100 attendings there, and it was a rainy day. So it really showed the need that there was in the community, and right away we started helping individuals with applying to college, financial aid information, and now a few years fast forward, we can see students that are coming back and saying, hey, I graduated college already, I started a career because of the help that you provided.
We have a lot of success stories. Now we've seen the harvest. And one of those stories is Miguel. He and his family started with us a couple of years back when we were first beginning. And the mom first brought in her daughter, Samantha. And Samantha's situation, it was difficult. She had limited English, but we helped her. Now she is about to graduate from a college in Chicago. And now we're helping the brother, Miguel, and he's in our Mijo program and has benefited from all of the services that Mamás Unidas is offering. And we can really see that he's headed in a great direction. And we're excited to see what college he ends up in.
One story that stuck with me was one of our students, Miguel, a high achieving student who thought he wanted to go into the medical field. But after offering him and along with the other Mijo students an aptitude assessment, he quickly realized that maybe the medical path wasn't the right fit for him and that going to the law was. And so based on that information, we were able to help his mother understand what that might look like. And we were able to give him very enriching resources and programs, one of which he was able to go to a summer program in Washington, D.C. To further explore that with like-minded students. And we were able to help him get a scholarship. And so now he's well on his pathway to go into a pre-law program, and we're excited to see what top university he goes to.
Mamás Unidas has really helped me through my educational journey because they've allowed me to take many ACT practice tests, and they've held many workshops that they hire tutors and you come every Saturday and you get some tutoring for ACT. And this has allowed me to raise my ACT score to apply to more selective colleges and also more scholarships that potentially could give me a full ride.
Mamás Unidas is the only organization in Arkansas that provides this kind of information to mothers for their kids. You know, a lot of them are first generation students and their parents did not go to college. They come to Mamás Unidas to get all that information. One of the reasons why I like being on the board of Mamás Unidas is because we've seen students from Batesville, Searcy, Conway, and Hot Springs come here for information. And like I said before, we are the only organization in Arkansas that does this. We want to be able to reach more parents and students to help them through this process that is very important for the future of our students.
Mamás Unidas ha ayudado a mi hijo de diferentes formas, por medio de talleres educativos, dándoles de comer cuando vienen a los talleres educativos, asegurándose de que estén bien emocionalmente, de que tengan todos los recursos necesarios para que ellos puedan ser exitosos.
Los patrocinadores y voluntarios pueden asistir a Mamás Unidas de manera económica, con recursos y siendo voluntarios, para así poder ofrecer más asistencia y ayuda a las familias que lo necesitan.
Mm. All right. So that's you can see a little bit more about what we do instead of me telling you. I thought it was great to see those photos and really get a picture of the work that we're doing in the community. So right now we focus on four main things. As the organization, one of them is info sessions. These are usually done in Spanish for the parents, and we talk to them about the basics of preparing for college, which, you know, the ACT, GPA, community service. That's our main focus. And every time the parents go, they leave like they're mind blown. Like, I didn't know it was this simple to help my child. I don't have to speak English. I don't have to know the educational system. All I have to do is make sure that he takes his ACT, that now I know how to check his grades and I know what these points mean. So, you know, they leave feeling empowered to support their children. And we have some parents that literally come to every single workshop that we do, and it's like the same workshop, and they just keep coming to the same workshop. And every time they leave, they're like, oh, I learned something new. So we love being able to do those. recently there's been a lot more demand to do these workshops, but of course, we since I said we're volunteer based, it's becoming harder to continue to meet that need. Right now, we're mainly focused in Central Arkansas, but for example, yesterday we met with a teacher from Warren, Arkansas, and they want us to go do a workshop there. And then, like right after the meeting, somebody this organization or group from Cersei reached out and said, "Hey, can you guys do a workshop?" Here again, and we've gone to Batesville and other areas, but our main focus is Little Rock's or Arkansas Central area, because of like I said, we're all volunteer based, but our goal is to eventually expand all across Arkansas. The other workshops that we have are for students. Of course, these are in English. These are for high school students. We've done ACT Prep, which is our most popular ones. We just got done with our winter one. They did them to prepare for the February 14 ACT. So they came for 4 Saturdays, and then they went and took the ACT. But this one, we opened up the registration, and in 2 days, the registration was closed because all the spots were taken, and that was for 60 students. So even though we have them now twice a year, they're still in high demand. Every time we open it, we're shocked at how fast the seats fill up, but still, 2 days this time for 60 students was crazy. But that's exciting to see. We also have done college tours. We took them last year to U of A. And then the year before that, it was Rhodes College in Memphis. And each time we took about 50 plus students. We rented a charter bus, and we opened the registration to all the community students here. It doesn't matter what high school they go to. They show up and we take them and bring them back at the end of the day. And it's always been really fun. And then we do other workshops throughout the year, like financial literacy, writing workshop, which Steve does, and some other workshops. Then we have the one-on-ones. Micah, who's, like I said, the president of Mamas Unidas, does 99% of these ones, and they go hand in hand with Trio because she does them at work. So Mamas Unidas serves more like a recruitment part, and then during Trio hours, we do those one-on-ones because they're helping Trio too. But we sit down with the student and the parent, and we talk about the student's specific situation and student profile, academics, all that. And then we figure out a plan. So if they're a senior, we do the FAFSA, college applications, turn-in documents. If they need to take any test, we help them with that. If they're younger than a senior, then we create a plan for them, a success plan for them to continue to prepare for applying to college. And then we have the Mijo program. Steve, do you want to speak on it since you're connected?
Yeah, the Mijo program is fantastic. Something that Sandra reached out to me because I was a college consultant. Anyway, it's a great program. It's for high achieving students. They go through an application process, interviews, and we're bringing in students who have a desire to go out of state to highly selective colleges, universities. And we provide a pretty robust college admissions curriculum, a workshop once a month, and then intensive one-on-one assistance with their applications to those highly selective schools. Right now, we're in a transition period. An announcement that I can make here is I'll be working with Sarah Gorman at Pulaski Academy in April, which I'm very excited about. So we're going to transition this Mijo program in a way that can still support the students. I unfortunately won't be able to provide the same kind of assistance I provided before, but it is fantastic, and we are going to find a way to continue the high level support for these students. But we have some amazing stories that have come out of it. Our very first two seniors were shocked to find out that they got into Amherst and Boston College on full rides. And that was just a testament to their hard work. Um, and we have a lot of good outcomes are coming for this senior class right now that we're waiting for. They had 3 QuestBridge finalists. And we're waiting to hear back decisions this coming month. I'm a little nervous, but it's been wonderful.
Yeah, and Steve has done an amazing job with this program. He took the lead on it, and right now we have 8, I believe, seniors, and I'm so excited to see where they'll end up. But yes, like he said, it's for highly achieving students to go to those selective colleges, and I'm excited to see where these students go and how we continue to structure the Mijo program in a way that will continue to benefit the students. And that's just one part. I like to clarify that's just one part of all the Mamás Unidas does. We do cohorts for this one, but all the other services are open to all the community students. It's not only those that are part of the Mijo program. All right, so a little overview of our work last year. We did over 1,980 direct service touch points, and that's whether we saw families in person, one-on-ones, tabling events, and so on. And then we also gave out 9 scholarships. Right now, we're getting ready to open up the scholarship application again. I'm so excited this morning. We signed an MOU for a private donor to give one scholarship for students that are interested in trades. So if you know any students that are interested, make sure you check out our website Monday, and the application will be open for them to apply. We also have 2 other businesses that did an MOU with us, and they're offering scholarships for those in the health field, and another one just in general. Then Mamás Unidas has their own out-of-pocket scholarships. And tomorrow I'm supposed to meet with another business that's interested in opening up a scholarship. So this program for scholarships continues to grow, and hopefully we'll be able to give more this year. We did 360 one-on-ones. Like I said, Micah does majority of them. 802 families served. And as you can see, a lot of our students, majority of our students are low income, first generation. And again, all this is volunteer work. We all have our full-time jobs. So I always love seeing the impact that we're making through this organization. Some upcoming events that I would like to take the opportunity to invite you to. We have our college fair next Thursday, so a week from today. And it's going to be at Exalt High School, which is off of I-30. We'll have over 10 colleges come. And the cool thing about this is that it will be in Spanish for the families. And every one of this college will have a Spanish-speaking representative, so the parents can come and understand the programs, the services, the scholarships that are being offered by the colleges. So I'm really excited about that. We'll also have testimonies from students and families that we've helped in the past, so they can talk to the people there. Another thing is we have our day of service. This is our biggest fundraiser of the year. And what this is on April 25th, this is our 3rd annual day of service. So on April 25th this year, we'll have over 100 volunteers across different sites in Central Arkansas doing community service. And then we'll end up the day with the celebration. We'll end the day with a celebration where we'll have food, community awards, live music, and just a great time to celebrate the impact that we're making in the community. So I encourage you to come and be part of this. We'll have the registration link soon where you can be a volunteer. Some of the sites include the Arkansas Food Bank, our house, El Zócalo, and we're working on the other ones, but you'll have plenty of places to choose from to go and volunteer that morning of the 25th. If you have students that are looking for volunteer opportunities, this will be a great event, especially since we end with that celebration and they get fed and have a good time. And they can come as family, as friends, to this. Also, the advertisement, if you know any business or organization that's willing to sponsor this event, definitely let me know. Like I said, this event supports our annual programming. And as we continue to expand, we need that to serve more communities across Arkansas and more families. So. And then, of course, like I said, the scholarships, they open up on March 1st. You can find that on our website or on our Facebook page. We'll have the details with the link to apply. Last thing, I think, yes. Last thing, sign up for our newsletter. We're trying to send them quarterly, where we keep you updated with everything that we're doing and that we have done, so that you can get involved, or you can get your students involved and give them the resources that they may benefit from that we offer. So I'll leave it at that. Any questions?
Thank you, Sandra. We worked together a lot on this, and just to kind of endorse Mamas Unidas, it's a phenomenal organization. When I first, volunteered with him, I was shocked to see how many families would show up, right? And I come from a Hispanic family as well, so watching, the parents and the kids and all the amazing food that they would have at all these workshops, is absolutely phenomenal. Um, so thank you, Sandra, for what you do for Trio and for Mamas Unidas. Um, there's Sandra's email.
Yes.
You can put it in the chat if you want.
Okay. I'll put on there if they want to take a screenshot, but yes, I'll put it on there as well.
Yeah. And it's mamasunidasLR.org is the website, with all the fantastic programming. So thank you, Sandra, for the presentation. Um, I don't want to keep anybody any longer, but this has been a great, successful event. I want to thank Sarah for moderating a wonderful conversation with Representative Ashley Hudson. Um, I learned a lot from that. I hope you guys all did as well. And I hope you took something out of a little bit of Advocacy 101 for my presentation. All of this has been recorded, which will be in the SACAC YouTube channel. Keep in mind that we have the Sweet Tea Tour that's registration, I believe, opened up today, or it's opening up soon. Next year there'll be an annual conference. There's a summer seminar if you want some additional training. Any of the SACAC leadership want to jump in and give a shout out to SACAC?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Monique shut it down, but before we do, thank you, Steve, Sarah, Sandra, for the amazing work you guys are doing in the city and in the state, through SACAC and through your organizations and institutions. Really appreciate you guys. Some other things, Monique is dropping a few links in the chat, but a couple other things to consider will be the Dream Grant. If you have an amazing idea, and let's say your school or your community-based organization doesn't have the resources to get out, SACAC sponsors tons of ideas through the Dream Grant. It is a reimbursement grant, but it goes up to $4,000. It's the opportunity for you to get your ideas out of your head into the community to really serve and help tons of kids out there. The others, if you're a part of a public school or community-based organization that doesn't have the funding to send you to conferences or to events in the future, we also have the Community Council Participation Fund. And that is also a reimbursement grant, but it fully funds uh, transportation, food, housing, and all costs associated with going to our conference and other SACAC related events. So there shouldn't be a barrier for you joining. And also our free access membership. You can join SACAC for free if you are a member of a public school or a charter school. And again, if you're in the state of Arkansas, there's tons of public schools all throughout the state that really need these resources, private schools as well. But for our public school constituents, we would love to have you join and be a member of SACAC and hopefully see you at the conference in the future. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Monique and let her close you guys out.
Steve and Sarah, I really don't know why he's turning it over to me because he did a phenomenal job. I'm just going to echo everything and say thank you, both for your leadership, Sandra and Steve. And I logged in just a little bit late, but I did get to hear some of your presentations, the Advocacy 101 and Trio. Absolutely phenomenal. So kudos to you. Thank you. Very well thought out and very timely. So I appreciate the energy and the time you put into your presentations. And to everyone that is on the call, if you were like me, you logged in a little late, please do go back and watch. Please do check out the chat for the resources we provided. And I'm going to just go ahead and speak that we're going to see you in New Orleans in just a couple of weeks. So thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sarah, do you have any parting words?
I'm just appreciative of everyone and definitely inspired.
Awesome.
Ready to do that one.
Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. And for those going to the conference, have fun, enjoy it, and I'm sure everybody will see each other. So thank you.
Steve and Sarah, can you guys stay on for about 5 minutes?
Yes.